A visitor has to look closely for signs of the wildfires that rushed over the prairies in Clarke County, Kansas last March. Unseasonably heavy rains have turned the Kansas prairie green, providing much-needed grass for ranchers who lost 600,000 acres of grazing ground to a fire that swept through the region over a 4-day period.
The minute it started that morning, it was all lost for the rest of us. So everything we tried to do or attempted to do during the fire, it was for naught.
Gardner was at the house of his brother Mark as the fire approached from the southwest. The brothers, along with Mark's wife, Eva, plotted the rescue of 4 horses in a nearby barn and escaped the inferno moments before it consumed their home base. Somehow the horses, and the horse barn, only yards away, survived.
By and large, everything that was confined or it was on wheat pastures, they survived. The cattle that we had out in grass pastures, they were consumed by the fire, or if somehow they made it afterwards, there was a large amount of those that needed to be destroyed. It was something that we never expected, never thought. You just really can't wrap your mind around the expanse of a 30-mile head fire.
The conditions were right for a devastating fire that day. A wet summer in 2016 had left pastures thick with grass that herds had not been able to eat. The ground was dry, the winds at 30 miles per hour, and the humidity below 5%. As a result, the fires raced over the landscape at speeds faster than cattle or humans could move. 6 people died, and more than 7,000 cattle were killed in the fires across 3 counties in Kansas and Oklahoma. Some cattle lived through the inferno, but their injuries were too severe for continued survival.
So as we looked at them, cattle were 3 categories: those that were alive and were out of harm's way, those that were dead and already their demise was taken care of. But our job was to come alongside of these people and say, this animal needs to be euthanized. Nobody wants to make that decision.
Clarke County, Kansas ranchers lost thousands of miles of fence as 3/4 of the county burned. Miles of ground were blackened. And as suddenly as the damage was inflicted, relief began to arrive.
I was headed on the country road to the highway to get to Ashland, and the very first thing I meet on the country road coming over a hill is a truck full of hay, and they're headed to the ranch. So, the cavalry's already on the way, and I haven't even got out back to town.
The volume of support forced the city of Ashland to organize to manage the avalanche of goodwill.
What we did was form this task force and use technology to help organize us, and that's kind of how we operated and communicated after the fire, and to really move forward. And everybody stepped up in one big way. When asked to do something, whether it's local or whether it's rural America responding to our disaster, everybody stepped up in a big way.
Mountains of fencing supplies and donated hay arrived in Clarke County over the following weeks. Clusters of hay are stockpiled in pasture corners, waiting for winter or when the grass can no longer support grazing. The fragile ground will take more than 1 season to return to full production. Ranchers will have to shift the number of acres per animal from 10-to-1 to as much as 20-to-1. The native grasses that make up the Kansas prairie, while durable, need time to regrow and return to normal productivity. The loss of these grasses resulted in the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when drought caused the thin layer of topsoil to be lifted into the air by the ever-present wind.
Cash flow is going to be tight. It's going to get that way. There's not going to be calves to sell this fall that generally there would be. But there's equity there that you need to take a look at.
Thousands of miles of fence were lost in the fire and will limit grazing acres until they are replaced. Many of the burned fences were built by homesteaders in the 19th century using branches from area trees. Some of the fences being built today are using all-metal posts in hopes of surviving the next fire, when it comes.
A lot of these fences stood the test of time. We will have another fire. We will have another something. And if the next generation, those fences are still standing 50, 80, 90 years from now, then we've done our job right now.
Dustin Walker ranches in eastern Clarke County, And while his grass acres burned, his herd was grazing on green wheat and survived. He has over 6 miles of fence to build at $10,000 per mile, but has received donations of both material and labor.
The donated supplies have been humbling and tremendous. The help has been outstanding. We wouldn't be able to do it without them, honestly. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money to try to get everything back to the way it should be. So it's been great, very humbling.
Just seemed right to come down and provide labor also. Cash and materials are great, but labor is always short because everybody has their own place at home to run. So, and I got the time to do it. So I'm here.
Ranchers also face a choice in rebuilding herds: buy what stock they can to maintain cash flow, or take the long view and rebuild with the genetic traits that survived the fire. Gardner's family business is built around cattle genetics. They have enough breeding stock and genetic reserves to move forward. But the toughest problem area ranchers face is the mental challenge of a business plan reset.
One thing that I'm convinced of, that ranchers like a plan. And when they can't execute a plan, and when they're managing chaos, it's really challenging. Those ranchers that are going to excel and mount over this obstacle are those ones that can manage chaos the best.
There are just so many blessings. I mean, the outpouring of support. I mean, it truly, again, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, but yet I think that's one thing that we have been, at the end of the day, been blessed.
From Market to Market, I'm Peter Tubbs.